was growing up, I genuinely used to think alien abductions were all just science fiction, but nowadays I'm not too sure. I feel like I've read enough credible stories at this point to make me a believer. Question for you, what do you believe? Let me know in the comments and let's see how today fares. Teensy disclaimer before I jump into things. A lot of today's sources are going to be anonymous. Why? Well, they don't want their lives affected by the stigma that goes with being abducted. So, respect their wishes, would ya? Great. We're kicking off today with a recent incident, one that happened on June 23rd of 2016. Let's call our brave witness Mike, just so I have an easy moniker to avoid getting confused by. Mike and his son visited Silver Dollar City, which is an amusement park in Branson, Missouri. These guys were having a great time, despite Mike suffering from occasional pain in his upper left arm. For context, and this is important folks, 2 days before he suffered a fall at work and sustained a deep 5-inch laceration which required 24 stitches. Yowza! But this trip had been pre-planned, and he was a good dad, so it's like, okay, I'm gonna keep my promise to my son and just grin and bear it. Junior wanted to ride the Wildfire, which is a roller coaster-like contraption where they strap folks in because you're traveling upside down. Mike wasn't super thrilled about it, but it's like, well, my little offspring is a little too young to go on by himself, I gotta go with them. Off we go. So the duo was strapped in their seats, and Mike's arm was aching something terrible because of the drop-down shoulder harness. So the ride starts, and minus the obvious glaring pain, everything's normal. But after going into the second loop, Mike went totally blank. He only remembers coming out of a corkscrew and leveling out at the end of the ride. Sure, he felt okay, but he was super confused. At first he was like, did I faint? But his son didn't notice anything. It wasn't like, hey dad, you fainted, or hey dad, you conked out. The guys got out of their seats, walked off the ride, and as they were continuing to walk towards their next attraction, Mike was like, wait a minute, I feel too good. I'm not feeling anything in my arm. So he reached inside his shirt, touched his upper left arm, the injured one, and there was no bandage. There was no stitches, no wound. Mike was so shocked that he almost fell to his knees. Which, not something you want to do in the middle of a theme park. The guys stayed there for another half an hour, and then they headed off. After Mike dropped off his son, he made a beeline home and into the bathroom. He looked in the mirror and there was no laceration. No mark whatsoever. What the HE double hockey sticks happened? So Monday he went to the doctor and he was like, hey, what's going on? So while Mike had received the stitches in the hospital, his doctor did have the admitting report from the emergency room physician, and it was right there, in writing. The doctor was like, ugh, and Mike could tell that he was wondering what was going on. What could he say? Mike was just like, here's what happened to the park. The doctor was like, well, stay well, I guess. Now his supervisor at work saw the wound, and now the supervisor was like, yo, what's going on? This is the guy who had to file the accident report, and he didn't know what to do, and Mike didn't know what to tell him. Mike's also mentioned that he used to suffer from a lot of back pain, and that's also not kicking around anymore. Maybe I should go on that roller coaster. Moving on, Daphne Fletcher claims that in the summer of 2010, when she was living in Washington, she owned a lot of businesses in the region that she was living in, including a ranch, a store, she had a restaurant, a cafe, a post office, and a gas station. But after the recession, she's like, I'm gonna sell everything and move to Southern California. So on this particular night, she had just finished packing everything up with her buddy Bill. She'd even picked up the check from the escrow office. She was ready to go. She was super excited, and her and Bill were like, we're gonna have one last bonfire since you can't pack that up. And then they were gonna go over to his mother's house after to hang out since they didn't have any furniture left. The duo had just put out the fire, they were going around the house, they got to the driveway, and then they spotted what they called an astronomically large spaceship just hovering above them in the trees. As a matter of fact, there was actually 2 ships. One was apparently the biggest thing you could possibly imagine in the sky, and it was blocking the whole sky. Daphne and Bill found themselves frozen from the sight, only able to utter, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. I could go on, but you get the point. Daphne could only barely see a little bit on either side, so it was definitely longer than it was wide, and it was facing south. But it was just huge! There was no way something that big could just be in the sky and not make any noise. There was no disturbances, and there was just a little triangle right next to it. And it was just, they're just frozen. They're just hanging out. These UFOs just stayed there planted for at least a minute. So the 2 humans, they were like, okay, we're looking at this, and then all of a sudden, poof, it was gone. Just nothing. Zilch. Nada. Daphne and Bill were both just flabbergasted, but they weren't afraid, and they wound up running late to Bill's mom's place. They thought they were going to get there at about 11, but it was 12:30 by the time they got there, which was kind of late, and Bill was just sort of out of sorts, which, who wouldn't be? You just saw UFOs. He told the story like a million times, and eventually the mom was like, okay, I believe you, I get it. Daphne and Bill didn't think much of it until years later when Daphne underwent hypnotic regression on a couple of occasions, and that's when she uncovered an additional encounter in her youth, as well as more details about this one. So what did she learn? Well, it's a little spotty. But during all that missing time, she and Bill were actually taken up into the spaceship by some vaguely gray humanoid aliens. We all know the type. She claims that she remembers that Bill was laid down on a gurney-like thing and wheeled into her room while she walked willingly with them through a hall. She believes that she was then shown little ones who were possibly her hybrid offspring. So going back to the experience before, apparently she'd interacted with the beings previously and had been shown young folks, but she didn't elaborate too much. She also mentioned that she had a couple of other UFO sightings. Gosh, I think she's just a magnet for UFOs and for those gray aliens. Let her be! Time to go back in time a little bit to an incident in New York from 1977. Sam lived in a remote area off of Trap Rock that bordered the Central Hudson power plant property along the river. It was October 29th and she was at her boyfriend's home, alone, in the evening, with her young son. She had been told by her boyfriend, never turn the lights out. Outside, inside, just leave at least something on. This was a ranch house that had heating vents in the ceilings. Apparently it's quite important. She really emphasized it. Respect that. So she heard a loud rumbling noise, and it was one that she had heard before, and it was so strong that it shook the vents out of place in the ceiling. See? Those are relevant. She was a little tired of climbing up to fixing them. It was 7 o'clock, her son was asleep, she tried turning on the TV and it was all scrambled. So then she's hearing like these rumbling, these humming noises. What does she do? She's like, okay, night night, turns out all the lights. Which, you're not supposed to do that. You're gonna see why. She went to the front bedroom window, opened it, and kneeled down to look out towards the river. She heard what sounded like a horse whinnying in the distance, and could see flashing lights close to the ground in a circular pattern just beyond the woods. Closer to the house, she saw her boyfriend's pets shaking from fright. And if there's something I know, it's that animals are super duper susceptible to the supernatural. Sam looked up in the sky and saw an aerial display of lights. One large main flying light, which was surrounded by smaller ones. It looked like the smaller flying things were protecting the bigger ones. Other than that, the sky was clear. And she thought she could just watch all their darting or moving around and whatever, it's entertaining. Maybe it's a drone show. She even pinched herself to make sure she was seeing what she was seeing. Like she was like, okay, enough. Then a glowing object left the formation and started moving closer and closer and closer to Sam. And you know how you have a couple of reactions when you're fearing things? Well, she froze. This dome, a red glowing thing, just hovered outside of her window area to the height of the roof eave. She was staring into a red fireball that she said was just, it was there. And she couldn't move, she couldn't speak, she could only think. She said in her thoughts, like, I'm not gonna watch anymore, we're good. And then there was a flash of red light and Sam was gone. When she found herself back around 30 minutes later, she had a stiff neck and was dealing with some internal redness that shouldn't be happening. Trust me, you can feel it. Her boyfriend came home and told her the truth. He told her that he had seen these alien beings and was actually doing things for them by the Hudson River. They would tell him to collect things and he would bring these things to them. He described the creatures as 4 foot high with slanted red eyes. They were subhuman and they knew everything he was thinking and doing. The next morning, the local paper had a lot of stories about people calling the police and reporting sightings and their animals going crazy. Central Hudson Electric would not allow any investigators on this property. So the next day, Sam visited a doctor who informed her that she had a perforated uterus. Now, during an exam a couple of months later, it was like, okay, you're not pregnant, but what's going on? And that's not the first I've heard about this. If you're unclear on what I'm saying, go back through some of our older videos. It's pretty wild. She got off easy, trust me. Alrighty, Adam lives in 10 Mile, Tennessee, and one night about 4 months ago, he was sleeping on a couch when he dreamed he was levitated into a spaceship, where he was laid on a cold metal slab and everything went dark. He woke up and he had a fever and he had some burn holes in his right rib cage. The burns looked like cigarette burns, but there was like 7 arranged like an X with 2 at the top and 2 on the sides that were perfectly symmetrical. After this, he was really sick for about 2 weeks and then out of sorts for a couple of months, suffering from a wide range of health issues. So it seems like they took something from his mind, infected him with something, and left the poor guy in quite a state. Alrighty everybody, we're gonna end today with Loretta in Oregon, who claimed she was abducted in 1967. Poor thing was driving to Portland after working all day in Denver and had pulled over at a rest stop to, well, take a nap, when she heard like a diesel vehicle pull up next to her. Trust me, you know what it sounds like. A little while later, she heard another one. But this time it seemed like it was on top of her, and all she could do was just cover her head in terror. It was like, what is going on out there? There was a pressure on her head and a greenish white light hit her feet and shocked the heck out of her. And that's when she got, well, beamed up for lack of a better word. She remembers feeling like she was seated on something, but she couldn't open her eyes out of fear. I don't blame her. She could feel the acceleration of going straight up, but couldn't feel any surroundings and can't remember any smells. After that, well, she blacked out. I don't blame her. She woke up the next morning in her car and had to pull round, sticky items off her skin, especially around her abdomen. Well, that's not helping the alien impregnation theory. There was a round unknown stuck to her stomach that didn't have legs and it was the size of a jawbreaker. And when she crushed it where it was attached to her skin, redness poured out. Ugh. Her mouth felt like it was full of gravel and she had a mysterious hole in a tooth that just couldn't be explained by science. No thank you, absolutely not. I don't want to be abducted anytime soon. And that's it for me again, folks. I know, no Betty or Barney today, but that's what binge watching's for. Go back. watch some things. I've been Alexa, your resident ookie spooky girly, and if you enjoyed my ramblings today, could you help us out by giving this video a like, subscribing if you aren't already, hit the bell for more alien content from us here at Top 5 Scary Videos, and I'll see y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.